You probably think this is just a petty squabble over a wedding venue. You are wrong. This is the story of how I set fire to $50,000 just to watch my family's perfect facade crumble. I did not cancel the contract to save money. I did it to burn the bridge they were planning to cross. The real shock is not what I lost, but the dirty secret I found that finally made their powerful allies walk away. My name is Kira Walsh, and I am 31 years old. I live in Harborview, Florida, a place where the humidity clings to you like a second skin and social standing is the only currency that actually matters. I work in landscape design, which means I spend my days bringing order to chaotic nature, pruning back the overgrowth to reveal the clean lines underneath. It is precise work. It requires patience, vision, and the ability to cut away dead weight without hesitation. Today, sitting in the leather driver's seat of my parked SUV, with the engine idling and the air conditioning blasting against the afternoon heat, I was about to apply those same principles to my own life. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. My hands were steady as I unlocked my phone and pulled up a contact I had saved under the Luminous Conservatory. Most brides in Harborview would kill to have this number in their favorites list. For me, it was just another contact, another contract, another loose end that needed to be cauterized. I pressed the call button. It rang twice before a polished, professional voice answered. The Luminous Conservatory, Events Department. This is Eleanor speaking. How may I assist you today? Ms. Walsh? Eleanor knew my voice. We had spent hours discussing the lighting schematics for the main glass atrium. She knew exactly how I wanted the orchids draped over the steel beams. She knew I had fought tooth and nail to secure the date. Hello, Eleanor, I said. My voice did not shake. It was flat, devoid of the frantic energy usually associated with wedding planning. I am calling to cancel my reservation. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence so thick I could almost hear Eleanor blinking in confusion. I beg your pardon? She asked, her tone shifting from professional courtesy to genuine bewilderment. You want to cancel the tasting menu? Or perhaps the floral walkthrough? No, Eleanor, I said, staring at a smudge on my windshield. I am canceling the entire event. The booking for June 14th. I need you to release the date immediately. Ms. Walsh? Eleanor's voice climbed an octave. June 14th is exactly 90 days away. We are entering the final confirmation window. If you cancel now, per the contract terms strictly enforced by the conservatory. I know the terms, I interrupted softly. You will forfeit the deposit, she pressed, sounding almost frantic on my behalf. Kira, that is $50,000. $50,000 that you will never see again. It is completely non-refundable. Are you absolutely certain you are not just having cold feet? $50,000. I closed my eyes for a second. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I could see every single dollar of that sum. I saw the packed lunches I had eaten in my truck for 2 years while my colleagues went out to bistros. I saw the holidays I had worked through, sweating in the Florida sun while my friends posted photos from the Hamptons. I saw the vintage car I had sold, the small apartment I had stayed in long after I could afford to move, all to save for this one day. $50,000 was not just money. In my family, money was the only language spoken fluently. It was affection. It was power. It was the yardstick by which my mother, Elaine, measured human worth. To burn $50,000 was an act of insanity to people like them. I am not having cold feet. Eleanor, I said, opening my eyes. The parking lot was bathed in the golden, blinding light of the late afternoon sun. I am fully aware that the $50,000 is gone. Please send the cancellation DocuSign to my email right now. I will sign it while we are on the phone. But the waiting list, Eleanor stammered. Kira, you know this. The waiting list for a June date at the conservatory is 4 years long. If I release this date, it will be snapped up by one of the 300 people on the standby list within 10 minutes. You will lose it forever. That is exactly what I'm counting on, I replied. Send the document, Eleanor. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard, followed by the ping of a notification on my tablet sitting on the passenger seat. I put the phone on speaker and opened the email. There it was, termination of agreement. The numbers stared back at me. Cancellation fee, 100% of deposit paid. My finger hovered over the screen. Most people would think I was crazy. They would think I was heartbroken, but I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I felt a strange, cold clarity. I was the useful daughter, the one who fixed things. When my younger sister Brielle crashed her car, I was the one who dealt with the insurance so my parents wouldn't be stressed. When my mother needed a centerpiece for her charity gala, I was the one staying up until 3 in the morning wiring flowers together. I was the reliable background character in the movie of their lives. And because I was the background character, they assumed I didn't have dreams, or rather, they assumed my dreams were simply placeholders for theirs. I signed my name on the screen, Kira Walsh. I hit submit. It is done, I told Eleanor. Release the date to the waiting list, right now. I simply do not know what to say, Eleanor whispered. I am so sorry. Kira, I know how much you love the venue. Thank you, Eleanor. You have been wonderful. I hung up the phone. The silence rushed back into the car, but the air felt different now, lighter. I looked at the dashboard again, 4:35. I had just vaporized $50,000 in 5 minutes. But here's the thing about landscape design. Sometimes, you have to scorch the earth to prevent a disease from spreading. You have to cut down a tree that looks healthy on the outside because you know the roots are rotting. And if you let it stand, it will crush the house. This wasn't about losing money. This was an entrance fee. I had just paid $50,000 to buy a front row seat to a war. Because I knew something Eleanor didn't. I knew that in exactly 2 hours, at 6:30 in the evening, my mother was going to summon me to her house. She would have a look of manufactured panic on her face. My sister, Brielle, would be crying on the velvet chaise lounge, looking tragically beautiful. They were going to ask for the venue. Actually, ask is the wrong word. They were going to demand it. They knew I had the June 14th date. I had made the mistake of mentioning it once, 6 months ago, when I first secured it through a favor owed to me by the conservatory's architect. At the time, they had scoffed. Why do you need a venue like that? My mother had asked, swirling her Chardonnay. You aren't even officially engaged yet. Evan hasn't given you a ring. They had laughed it off as Kira being overprepared, Kira being desperate. But now, Brielle was in trouble. I had heard the whispers through the grapevine of Harborview society. Brielle had snagged a big fish, Matthew Holloway, scion of the Holloway shipping fortune. But the Holloways were old money, exacting and critical. They wanted a June wedding, they wanted prestige, and every high-end venue in Florida was booked solid. Except mine. Tonight, they were going to try to take it from me. They had probably already promised it to the Holloways. They assumed that because I was Kira, the doormat, the fixer, the one who never made a fuss, I would roll over. They thought they could guilt me, manipulate me, or bully me into transferring the contract into Brielle's name. They thought my $50,000 was just a down payment on Brielle's happiness. I looked at my phone. The screen remained dark. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I started the car engine. The vibration hummed through the steering wheel, grounding me. I was going to drive over there. I was going to walk into that house. I was going to let them scream, let them cry, let them act out their little play. I was going to let them corner me, thinking they had won, thinking they had successfully stripped me of the one beautiful thing I had built for myself. And then, when they were absolutely sure they had taken everything from me, they would find out the truth. They would find out there was nothing left to steal. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the parking space. A grim smile touched my lips, reflected in the rearview mirror. It didn't reach my eyes. The contract was void. The date was gone. The money was ash in the wind. Let the show begin, to understand why I sat in that car and destroyed my own bank account. You have to understand the people I was driving toward. To the outside world, the Hart family is a masterpiece of American suburban success. We are the Christmas card that everyone envies. My mother, Elaine Hart, is the curator of this exhibit. She is a woman who has never had a hair out of place in 3 decades. A woman who treats motherhood not as a nurturing role, but as a management position. She believes that if you smile wide enough and dress well enough, you can hide any rot in the foundation. Then there is Brielle, my younger sister. If our family was a solar system, Brielle was the sun. She has always been blindingly bright, effortlessly charismatic, and utterly consuming. From the moment she was born, she demanded attention simply by existing. She was the cheerleader, the homecoming queen, the one who could charm a traffic cop out of a ticket with a bat of her eyelashes. She was the star. And me? I was the scaffolding. I was the one who stayed up until 2 a.m. in high school, rewriting Brielle's history papers because she was too exhausted from practice. I was the one who drove her to appointments, who remembered my father's medication, who organized the caterers for my mother's dinner parties while she took the credit for the ambiance. I was the fixer, the cleaner, the invisible hand that kept the machinery of the Hart family humming along so that Elaine and Brielle could shine in the spotlight. For a long time, a pathetic part of me believed that this was love. I thought that because they needed me, they valued me. I told myself that my utility was my currency, if I could just be helpful enough, reliable enough, indispensable enough. Then eventually, they would look at me with the same adoration they saved for Brielle. I thought love was a transaction, and I was paying my dues in sweat and silence. It took Evan Brooks to show me how wrong I was. Evan is not part of the Harborview elite. He does not drive a luxury car or have a membership at the country club. He is a structural engineer, a man who understands how things are built and how they break. When we met, I was running around a charity event, frantically trying to fix a floral arch that had collapsed, while my mother stood nearby sipping champagne and apologizing to guests for the help's incompetence. Evan saw me. He didn't see a frantic assistant. He saw a woman holding up a heavy load with bleeding hands. He walked over, took the heavy iron frame from me, and simply said that I looked like I needed a break. Evan was the first person to ask me what I wanted for dinner, rather than telling me what to cook. He was the first person to look at my sketches of landscape designs and call them art. He loved me not because I did things for him, but simply because I was Kira, with him. I didn't have to earn my place. I just had to be. That was when the dream started to take shape. I wanted a wedding that was mine, not a production directed by Elaine Hart, not a supporting role in the Brielle show, but something that belonged to me and Evan. I started a secret savings account 3 years ago. I called it my Freedom Fund. Every bonus from work, every overtime check, every dollar I saved by skipping vacations or brown bagging my lunch went into that account. I did not tell my parents. If Elaine knew I had extra money, she would have found a reason why the family needed it. A loan for my father's investments, or a bailout for one of Brielle's maxed-out credit cards. So I kept it hidden. It was my silent rebellion. And then there was the Luminous Conservatory. In Harborview, the conservatory is not just a venue, it is a declaration of victory. It is a sprawling Victorian-style glasshouse filled with rare botanical specimens, where the walls are transparent and the ceiling opens up to the stars. Getting married there is the ultimate status symbol. It says you are powerful, you are connected, and you have conquered the social ladder. But for me, it was about the work. I am a landscape designer. 2 years ago, I led the restoration project for the city's botanical gardens, which are owned by the same trust that manages the conservatory. I spent months knee-deep in mud, revitalizing the orchid collection and redesigning the irrigation systems. Mr. Sterling, the head of the trust, respected my work ethic. He saw me there at 6 a.m. when the fog was still on the grass. When I finally had enough money in my secret account, I went to him. I did not ask for a discount. I asked for a date. I want the second Saturday in June. I had told him, I know the waiting list is impossible, but I am asking. June 14th, the peak of the blooming season, the most coveted date in the entire calendar. Mr. Sterling had looked at me over his spectacles. He knew my family. He knew the reputation of the Harts, but he also knew me. He knew the soil under my fingernails. He bypassed the 4-year waiting list and slotted me in. Not as a favor to my father, but as a nod of respect to a fellow gardener. I remember the day I paid the deposit. $50,000. It was a staggering amount of money. It was every penny I had scraped together for 36 months. My hand shook as I wrote the check, but not from fear. It shook with pride. I was buying something that no one in my family had given me. I was buying a space where I would be the protagonist. I took the contract, with its gold-embossed seal and the bold date of June 14th, and I did not bring it home. I knew better. I locked it in the fireproof safe in my office at work. I treated it like a nuclear code. It was the physical proof that Kira Walsh was a person with a future, not just a prop in someone else's life. I imagined walking down that glass aisle toward Evan. I imagined the look on my mother's face when she realized I had secured the crown jewel of Harborview without her help. I imagined, foolishly, that she might finally be proud. I thought that if I could pull off something this magnificent, this difficult, this expensive, she would finally have to admit that I was worthy. I was so naive. I spent months visiting the venue in secret, planning the lighting, the flowers, the music. I visualized every second. It kept me going when Brielle would call me crying about a broken fingernail, or when my father would ignore my birthday because he was busy golfing. I had my secret. I had June 14th. I never suspected that my silence was the only thing protecting me. I never suspected that the moment my family found out about the prize I held in my hands, they wouldn't see it as my achievement. They would see it as a wasted resource. They would look at my dream and see an asset to be seized, liquidated, and reinvested in the only stock they cared about: Brielle. I locked that contract in a steel safe, thinking it was secure. I paid $50,000 of my own hard-earned money, thinking it bought me ownership. I did not know that to my family. Ownership was a fluid concept, and that my name on a piece of paper meant nothing compared to their desires. I did not know that the contract I cherished was not a shield. It was a target. And tonight, I was walking into a room where they expected me to hand over the weapon they would use to kill the only thing I had ever truly wanted for myself. The vibration of my phone against the center console was not a sound. It was a summons. I glanced down at the screen as I pulled into my parents' driveway. It was a text message from my mother, Elaine. "Come over immediately. Emergency." In the lexicon of the Hart family, the word emergency is a flexible term. When applied to my father, it means he cannot find his golf clubs. When applied to me, it usually means I am late for a chore I did not know I had been assigned. But when the emergency concerns Brielle, the word takes on a frantic, catastrophic weight. It means the world has stopped spinning on its axis because the princess has stubbed her toe. I killed the engine. The silence of the car felt like a final deep breath before plunging underwater. I knew exactly what awaited me inside. I stepped out into the humid Florida evening, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward the front door. I did not knock. I still had a key, a heavy brass thing that felt less like a tool for entry and more like a shackle I kept on my keychain. The living room was staged like a tableau from a Victorian tragedy. My mother was pacing the length of the Persian rug, her heels clicking a sharp, nervous rhythm against the hardwood, and there, draped across the cream-colored velvet sofa, was Brielle. She was crying, but it was not the ugly, snot-nosed sobbing of genuine grief. It was a picturesque, cinematic weeping. Her face was flushed a delicate rose gold. Her eyes were glistening with unshed tears, and she was clutching a tissue as if it were a lifeline. She looked beautiful. She always looked beautiful when she was suffering, because she understood that suffering was just another angle to be photographed from. "Thank God you are here," Elaine said, not looking at me, but looking through me, her eyes darting back to Brielle. "It is a disaster, an absolute disaster." I set my purse down on the entryway table. Is everyone physically uninjured? I asked. It was my standard opening line. Don't be clinical, Kira, my mother snapped. This is about your sister's future. It is about the wedding. I walked over to the armchair opposite the sofa and sat down. I kept my posture straight, my hands folded in my lap. What happened? Brielle let out a small, choked sound. Vivian Holloway, she whispered, the name trembling on her lips. She hates me. She does not hate you, Elaine corrected immediately, rushing to the sofa to stroke Brielle's hair. She is just particular. She is testing us. The Holloways are old money. Kira. They do not do things by halves. Vivian called us an hour ago. She has been reviewing the wedding plans. And? I asked. And she is threatening to cut the budget, Elaine said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She said that Matthew's trust fund has strict stipulations regarding marital ceremonies. She said that unless the wedding meets the family's standards of prestige, they will not release the funds for the reception. How much are we talking about? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. $300,000, Brielle wailed, burying her face in a throw pillow. $300,000, Kira. Without that money, I can't have the imported peonies. I can't have the live orchestra. I'll have to get married in a hotel ballroom like a commoner. I watched my sister fall apart over the prospect of a hotel ballroom. So, what is the condition? I asked. What does Vivian Holloway want? Elaine stopped pacing. She turned to face me, and for the first time since I entered the room, I saw the predator behind the panic. Her eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. She wants the wedding to be in June, Elaine said slowly, and she absolutely insists, that it must be held at the Luminous Conservatory. She says it is the only venue in Harborview that carries enough weight for a Holloway heir. I felt the air in the room shift. The trap had been sprung. Well, I said, keeping my voice even, that is unfortunate. Everyone knows the conservatory is booked years in advance. June is 90 days away. It is impossible. Is it? Elaine asked. She took a step toward me, because I heard a very interesting rumor today. Kira, I was having lunch with Mrs. Sterling, the wife of the conservatory's director, and she mentioned something very strange. She mentioned that the second Saturday in June is not booked by a stranger. She mentioned it is booked by a Walsh. The room went deadly silent. Brielle stopped crying. She lowered the tissue, her eyes dry and sharp, watching me with the intensity of a hawk spotting a field mouse. I see, I said. Is it true? Elaine demanded. Do you have the reservation? Yes, I admitted. I do? Why? Elaine threw her hands up, an exaggerated gesture of disbelief. Why on earth would you have a reservation? You are not even engaged. Kira, Evan has not given you a ring. You are playing house with a mechanic, and you went behind our backs to book the most exclusive venue in the state? He is a structural engineer, I corrected automatically. And yes, I booked it. I paid for it. It was my money, and my plan. Your plan? Elaine laughed. A brittle, harsh sound. To do what? To stand there alone in a white dress and hope someone marries you? That is pathetic. Kira, it is delusional. It was for when we are ready, I said. Because unlike Brielle, I do not expect things to be handed to me. I knew the waiting list was long, so I prepared. Well, it is a good thing you did, Brielle said. Her voice had lost all traces of the weepiness from 30 seconds ago. She sat up straighter, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Because now you can save me. I looked at my sister. Save you? Transfer the contract, Brielle said. It wasn't a question. It was a directive. Change the name on the booking from Kira Walsh to Brielle Hart. It is simple. You call them. You sign a waiver, and it is done. You can give it to me as a wedding present. A wedding present, I repeated. Brielle, the deposit was $50,000. So? Brielle shrugged. Mom and Dad will pay you back, eventually, or we can count it as your contribution to the family. Look, you don't need it. You aren't getting married in June. I am. I have the ring. I have the fiancé. I have the $300,000 on the line. If I don't get this venue, I lose everything. I lose face with the Holloways. You want me to just hand over a date I worked 2 years to secure? I asked. Just like that? You are being selfish, Elaine cut in. She moved to stand behind Brielle, placing her hands on my sister's shoulders, presenting a united front. Your sister is in a crisis. This is her moment. She is the one marrying a Holloway. Do you understand what that means for this family? It elevates all of us, and you are sitting there hoarding a date you cannot even use, just out of spite? It is not spite, I said. It is mine. It is waste, Elaine shouted. It is a waste of a resource. You are holding on to a fantasy. Kira, while your sister is trying to build a reality, you are the older sister. It is your job to look out for her. You have always been the sensible one. Why are you being difficult now? Because, I said, looking at the two of them, the golden child and her manager, you are asking me to erase myself so she can have a better backdrop for her photos. We are asking you to be family, Brielle snapped. God, you are so jealous. You have always been jealous of me. That is what this is, isn't it? You booked that place because you knew I wanted it. You did it to block me. I booked it 2 years ago. Brielle, I said calmly. Before you had even met Matthew. Before you even knew who the Holloways were. It doesn't matter when you booked it, Elaine interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. What matters is what we do now. The Holloways are coming to dinner tonight, at the Crown Room. We are meeting them in 2 hours to finalize the plans. I looked at my mother. And? And you are coming with us, Elaine said. You are going to come to dinner, and you are going to smile, and you are going to tell Vivian Holloway that you are thrilled to gift your reservation to your baby sister. I am not going to do that, I said. Elaine leaned in closer. Her face was hard, the mask of the perfect mother completely gone, replaced by the desperate ambition that drove her. You have to, she said. Her voice dropped to a terrifyingly calm register. Why do I have to? I challenged her. Because, Elaine said, locking eyes with me. I already told Vivian you would. I told her this afternoon that the reservation was in the family name, and that you were merely holding it for Brielle until the engagement was official. I promised her, Kira. I gave her my word that you would hand it over tonight. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the physical sensation of realization. They hadn't just planned to ask me. They had already sold me. My mother had leveraged my property, my money, and my name to buy favor with a wealthy family, assuming that when push came to shove, I would simply fold. She had bet her honor on my submission. You promised her, I repeated slowly. You promised her something that does not belong to you. I promised her that my daughter would do the right thing, Elaine said. Don't make a liar out of me. Kira, if you humiliate me in front of the Holloways, if you cost Brielle this marriage, I will never forgive you. Brielle smiled then. It was a small, triumphant smile. She knew she had won. She knew that the pressure of family honor and the threat of our mother's eternal rage had always been enough to break me before. She reached out and patted my knee. Thanks, Kira, she said, as if I had already agreed. You're the best, really. I'll let you be a bridesmaid. I might even let you pick the color of the napkins. I looked at Brielle's hand on my knee. I looked at Elaine's expectant, demanding face. They thought the trap was closed. They thought I was cornered. They had no idea that I had already burned the building down before I even walked through the door. Okay, I said. The word tasted like ash, but I forced it out. Good, Elaine exhaled, clapping her hands together. Go fix your makeup. You look pale. We leave in 20 minutes. I stood up. I'll be ready. I walked toward the bathroom, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with a dark, adrenaline-fueled anticipation. They wanted me to come to dinner. They wanted me to verify their lie. I would go to dinner, but I wasn't going there to save face. I was going there to make sure there was an audience when the guillotine finally fell. The drive to the restaurant felt less like a commute and more like a transport to a sentencing hearing. I sat in the back of my parents' luxury sedan, watching the palm trees of Harborview blur into streaks of green and gray against the twilight. My mother, Elaine, sat in the passenger seat, aggressively checking her reflection in the visor mirror, while my father drove in his usual stoic, detached silence. Brielle was next to me, scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving with a manic speed that betrayed her anxiety. The air inside the car was thick with the conversation we had just finished in the living room. It had not been a negotiation, it had been a dictation. When I had hesitated, just for a second, to gauge their reaction, Elaine had turned on me with a ferocity that was almost impressive. She did not ask me to help. She did not plead for a favor. She laid out the terms of my existence in this family. She told me that if I did not transfer the venue, I would be making her a liar. She had already staked her reputation on my compliance. In her mind, my refusal was not an assertion of my rights. It was a direct assault on her credibility. Brielle had played her part perfectly, chiming in with the breathless panic of a victim. She told me that if she lost the luminous conservatory, she would lose face. She said the Holloways would look down on her, that she would enter her marriage with a deficit of respect. She made it sound as if my venue was the only thing standing between her and social exile. I had looked at them both and asked the question that any rational person would ask. I asked about the money. I paid a $50,000 deposit, I had said, my voice steady. That is 2 years of my life. That is my savings. If I transfer the contract, who pays me back? Do I get a check tonight? Elaine had waved her hand in the air, a gesture of dismissal so casual it stung worse than a slap. Oh, Kira, honestly, she had sighed, as if I were being petty about a $5 coffee. You are so good at managing things. You are resourceful. You will earn it back in no time. You can book the venue again later, in a few years, when you actually need it. Brielle needs it now. That was the sentence that severed the final thread. When you actually need it. It was not just about the money, it was the implication behind the dismissal. To Elaine and Brielle, my relationship with Evan, my engagement, my future, it was all hypothetical. It was a hobby. They did not believe my love story had the same weight as Brielle's. To them, my dreams were just placeholders, easily erased and overwritten when the real star of the family needed the stage. I was not a daughter with a life of her own. I was a reservoir of resources, time, money, labor, and now status, that they could tap into whenever they ran dry. They looked at me and saw a spare battery. I looked out the window as we turned onto the coastal highway. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Evan. I am coming over. I am not letting them do this to you. Tell me where you are. I stared at the screen. I could picture Evan right now, standing in our small kitchen, his jaw set, ready to drive into the lion's den and defend me. He would storm into the restaurant. He would tell the Holloways the truth. He would shame my mother and expose Brielle. It was a tempting thought, but it was wrong. If Evan burst in there, my mother would spin it instantly. She would paint him as the aggressive, low-class boyfriend who was corrupting her sensible daughter. She would say I was being manipulated by him. She would make herself the victim of his outburst. I typed back slowly. Do not come. Trust me. I need to handle this. I need to see how far they will go. Kira, they are stealing $50,000 from you, he replied. No, I thought, they are trying to steal $50,000. But you cannot steal from an empty vault. I love you, I typed. Wait for me. I silenced the phone. We arrived at the Harborview Crown Room. It is the kind of place where the valet parking costs more than most people's hourly wage, and the air smells of expensive cologne and roasted duck. My father handed the keys to the valet, and as we walked toward the heavy mahogany doors, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from Elaine, even though she was walking 5 feet in front of me. Do not embarrass me. Smile, be agreeable, remember who you are. I read the message and almost laughed. Remember who you are. She meant I should remember that I was the obedient one, the fixer, the one who smoothed over the cracks. But she had no idea that I was remembering something else entirely. I was remembering the sound of Eleanor's voice on the phone when I canceled the contract. I was remembering the feeling of the delete button. I walked into the restaurant, not as the cowed daughter they expected, but as a spy. I was deep behind enemy lines. If I had stayed home, if I had refused to come, they would have controlled the narrative. They would have told the Holloways that poor Kira was unstable, that she was jealous of her sister's success, that she was holding the venue hostage out of spite. They would have assassinated my character before the appetizers arrived. By being here, I robbed them of that story. I was present. I was calm. I was dangerously lucid. We navigated through the dining room, the crystal chandeliers casting a warm, deceptive glow over the diners. I saw the Holloway family waiting at a private corner table. They looked like royalty holding court. Vivian Holloway sat at the head, her posture rigid, her silver hair coiffed into a helmet of perfection. Beside her was her husband, looking bored, and Matthew, Brielle's fiancé, who looked like a man who was happy as long as the checks cleared. Elaine's demeanor changed instantly. Her spine straightened, her smile widened to a blinding wattage, and she glided toward them with arms outstretched. "Vivian," she cooed. "So lovely to see you. Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice." I hung back slightly, watching the performance. Brielle was right behind Mom, adopting a shy, demure expression that I knew she had practiced in the mirror. I walked up to the table last. "And this is Kira," Elaine said, gesturing to me as if presenting a slightly disappointing side dish. "Our eldest." Vivian Holloway turned her gaze toward me. Her eyes were like blue lasers. They scanned my dress, my shoes, my hair, and finally settled on my face. There was no warmth in that look. It was an appraisal. She was assessing my value to the merger she was orchestrating. "The landscape designer," Vivian said, her voice dry. "Yes," I said, extending my hand. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Holloway." She took my hand briefly. Her grip was cold and firm. "We have heard quite a bit about you today. Kira, your mother tells us you have been very forward-thinking regarding the wedding planning." "I try to be prepared," I said neutrally. "Please, sit," Matthew said, gesturing to the empty chairs. I took the seat across from Vivian. The table was set with heavy silverware and crystal glasses. It was a battlefield disguised as a dinner party. Elaine wasted no time. As soon as the waiter had poured the water, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was meant to bond the two mothers together. "Vivian, I want to put your mind at ease immediately," Elaine said. "I know we discussed the venue concerns earlier. I want you to know that the Hart family is fully committed to giving Brielle and Matthew the celebration they deserve. We understand the importance of standards." "Standards are everything," Vivian said, taking a sip of her water. "The Holloway name carries certain expectations. We cannot have a reception in a marquee on a lawn. Elaine, it must be the conservatory. It is the only venue with the requisite pedigree for our guest list." "Absolutely," Elaine nodded vigorously. "And that is why we are so blessed. As I mentioned, Kira here has held a reservation at the conservatory for the second Saturday in June for quite some time. She has been holding it as a placeholder for the family." Elaine turned to me, her eyes widening, a silent command to pick up the cue. "Isn't that right, Kira?" she asked. The table went silent. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me. Brielle looked hopeful and pathetic. Elaine looked commanding. The Holloways looked expectant. This was the moment. This was the precipice. I could see the script they had written for me. I was supposed to smile, nod, and say, "Yes, of course, anything for my sister." I was supposed to hand over 2 years of hard work and $50,000 like it was a party favor. I looked at Elaine. I saw the threat in her eyes. "Don't you dare!" I looked at Brielle. I saw the entitlement. "Give it to me." Then I looked at Vivian Holloway. I saw a woman who respected power and despised weakness. She was waiting to see if I was a player or a pawn. I picked up my napkin and unfolded it slowly. Placing it on my lap, I smoothed the fabric, taking my time, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. I did indeed have a reservation for June 14th, I said, keeping my voice pleasant and conversational. See? Elaine exhaled, a triumphant sound. Problem solved. It is a beautiful venue, I continued, ignoring my mother. The light in the atrium at sunset is truly spectacular. I can see why you would want it, Mrs. Holloway. It requires a great deal of foresight to secure. Indeed, Vivian said, leaning forward. So we can assume the transfer paperwork can be signed tomorrow? I smiled at her. It was a polite smile, the kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. I am here tonight to ensure everything is clear, I said. I would hate for there to be any miscommunication regarding something so expensive. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just kept talking, dancing around the edge of the truth, baiting them to push me. I wasn't here to beg for their mercy. I wasn't here to ask for my money back. I was here to document the fraud. Every word my mother said, every lie Brielle nodded along to, was another nail in their coffin. They were digging a hole, and I was just handing them the shovels. Elaine kicked me under the table, a sharp, pointed jab to my shin. I didn't flinch. I just took a sip of my water and looked at my mother with eyes that said, "Go ahead. Hit me again. It only adds to the evidence." "We are so grateful to Kira," Brielle chirped, her voice a little too high. "She knows how much this means to me." "I do," I said softly. "I know exactly what this means." The waiter arrived to take our orders. The curtain had risen. The first act was over, and as I looked at the menu, I realized I had never been hungrier in my life. I was going to enjoy this meal. It was going to be the last peaceful dinner the Hart family would ever have. The waiter poured the vintage Pinot Noir with a practiced, silent grace, the crimson liquid rising in the crystal glasses like a rising tide. The atmosphere in the Harborview Crown Room was suffocating, thick with the scent of truffle oil, expensive perfume, and the heavy metallic tang of unsaid things. It was a world of hushed tones and violent implications, where a smile could be a weapon and a compliment could be a threat. Despite my text message telling him to stay away, Evan was sitting right beside me. He had been waiting at the entrance when we arrived, wearing his only suit, his jaw set in a line of stubborn protection. He had ignored my mother's glare and simply taken my hand, leading me to the table. Now, his hand was resting on my knee under the tablecloth, a warm, grounding weight in a room that felt like it was spinning out of control. I kept my face impassive, a porcelain mask that mirrored the women around me, but my thumb traced the knuckles of his hand, drawing strength from his defiance. Across the table, the Holloway family sat like a panel of judges. Vivian Holloway was a study in icy perfection, her diamonds catching the low light of the chandeliers. Her husband, Richard, seemed more interested in the wine list than the conversation, but I knew better than to mistake indifference for ignorance. They were watching. They were calculating. My mother, Elaine, decided it was time to fire the opening salvo. She picked up her wine glass, her manicured nails tapping lightly against the stem to command attention. "I would like to propose a toast," Elaine announced, her voice pitching perfectly between warmth and authority. She beamed at the table, a radiant, terrifying smile that did not reach her eyes. "To Brielle and Matthew, and to a perfect June wedding at the luminous conservatory, may it be the start of a union as beautiful and prestigious as the venue itself." She raised her glass, and as she did, her eyes locked onto mine. It was not a loving gaze, it was a sniper taking aim. The message was clear. Drink, smile, agree. Do not dare to shatter this glass house I have built. "To the wedding," Matthew said, raising his glass. "To the happy couple," Evan murmured beside me, though I could hear the edge in his voice. We drank. The wine tasted bitter on my tongue. Vivian Holloway set her glass down with a precise click. She folded her hands on the table and turned her attention to my sister. Brielle was glowing, basking in the attention, her earlier tears in the living room completely forgotten. She looked the part of the blushing, triumphant bride perfectly. "You know, Brielle," Vivian began, her tone conversational, but her eyes sharp, I must admit I was surprised when your mother mentioned the venue. The conservatory is notoriously difficult to secure. The waiting list is a nightmare of bureaucracy. Most of our associates have to book it 4 or 5 years in advance, or settle for a Sunday in November. Vivian leaned forward slightly, like a predator inspecting a trap. How on earth did you manage to secure the second Saturday in June? That is the prime date of the season. I felt Evan's hand tighten on my knee. This was it, the moment of truth. Elaine opened her mouth to interject, to spin the story for her, but Brielle beat her to it. My sister turned to Vivian, batting her eyelashes with a display of false modesty that turned my stomach. "Well, Mrs. Holloway," Brielle said, her voice soft and sweet. "I have always been a bit of a planner. I know people think I am just a free spirit, but when it comes to things that matter, I take them very seriously." She paused for effect, glancing at Matthew lovingly. "I actually booked the venue 2 years ago." Brielle lied. The words came out of her mouth so smoothly, so easily, that if I hadn't been the one who starved myself to pay the deposit, I might have believed her. I wasn't even dating Matthew then, but I had a feeling. I knew that when I met the right person, I wouldn't want to wait. I wanted everything to be ready. So I used my savings. I made the calls, and I locked it down. I guess you could say I bet on my own future. The silence that followed was stunned. 2 years ago? Matthew asked, looking at Brielle with a newfound awe. "You did that? Before we even met?" "I knew you were coming," Brielle cooed, squeezing his hand. "I just wanted to be ready for you." "That is impressive," Vivian admitted, her icy demeanor thawed by a fraction of a degree. She looked at Brielle not just as a pretty ornament for her son, but as someone with value. "That shows a remarkable amount of foresight. Brielle, I value that. Most young women your age are frivolous with their finances. To invest in a strategic asset like a prime venue reservation, that shows management skills. It shows you understand the long game." "Thank you," Brielle said, dipping her head. "I learned from the best." She gestured vaguely to our mother, who was beaming like she had just won the lottery. I sat there, frozen. It wasn't just the lie that hurt. It was the specific nature of the lie. Brielle wasn't just stealing my venue. She was stealing me. She was stealing my competence. She was stealing my foresight. She was stealing the 2 years of discipline, the late nights, the sacrifices, the professional reputation I had built with the venue owners, all the things that made me Kira, the planner, the worker, the reliable one. She was stripping off my skin and wearing them like a coat. She was the chaotic one. She was the one who overdrew her checking account every month. She was the one who forgot deadlines. But tonight, in front of the people who mattered, she was claiming the one virtue I possessed. She was rewriting history to make herself the smart, capable heroine and casting me into the void. "It is rare to find that kind of prudence," Richard Holloway grunted, nodding in approval. "Good show." "And Kira," Vivian said, turning her laser gaze back to me, "it is very sweet of you to help coordinate the details, but we must give credit where credit is due. Your sister is clearly the mastermind here." The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Evan started to stand up, his chair scraping against the floor, but I clamped my hand down on his forearm, anchoring him. "Not yet." I signaled, "Not yet." "Brielle is certainly full of surprises," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "She has a very vivid imagination." "She certainly does," Elaine cut in sharply, sensing the danger in my tone. "But the important thing is that the venue is secured. The contract is in the family name, and we are all just so thrilled to move forward. Right, Kira?" She was pushing me. She was daring me to contradict the narrative they had just sold. I looked at Brielle. She was smiling at Matthew, basking in his admiration. She loved this. She loved being seen as the capable, brilliant partner. She had no idea that she was building her marriage on a foundation of quicksand. And that was when the realization crystallized in my mind, cold and sharp as a diamond. If I gave in tonight, if I signed that transfer paper tomorrow, I wouldn't just be losing $50,000. I wouldn't just be losing a date. I would be validating a fraud. I would be helping them trick the Holloway family into investing $300,000 in a lie. Vivian Holloway was a businesswoman. She was agreeing to this marriage and this budget because she believed she was acquiring a daughter-in-law who was prudent, strategic, and capable. She was buying into the Brielle that I had created with my hard work. If I transferred the contract, I became an accomplice. I became a co-conspirator in a financial and emotional scam. I would be helping my sister entrap a man by pretending to be someone she was not. "Right, Kira?" Elaine repeated, her voice possessing a serrated edge. I took a sip of my water. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. "Actually," I said, setting the glass down, "there is one small detail regarding the contract that we should probably discuss." Elaine's eyes widened. She shook her head imperceptibly. "Stop." "Oh?" Vivian asked, raising an eyebrow. "What detail is that?" "The transfer policy," I said calmly. "It is very strict at the conservatory. They require the original signatory to be present for any changes, to ensure that everything is legitimate." "Well, that is fine," Brielle said dismissively. "You can come with me tomorrow." "Of course," I said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I wasn't going to sign it. I wasn't going to transfer it. I had already canceled it. But looking at them now, seeing how easily they lied, how smoothly they stole my life to decorate theirs, I realized that simply canceling wasn't enough. I needed them to walk into the trap. I needed Vivian Holloway to see the lie fall apart in real time. I wasn't just a victim here. I was the only witness to the crime. And tomorrow, when the truth came out, I wouldn't be the one on trial. "I am sure it will be a mere formality," Vivian said, losing interest and turning back to her meal. "Now, let us discuss the guest list. The governor will need a prominent table." I picked up my fork. The metal felt cold and heavy. I let them talk. I let them plan. I let them build castles in the air on a plot of land I had already scorched to the ground. Elaine shot me a look of triumph, thinking she had cowed me into submission. She thought I was eating humble pie. She didn't know I was just gathering evidence. I was not here to beg. I was here to record the scene of the accident before it happened. And as I looked at my sister, preening in her stolen glory, I felt a strange sense of peace. She wanted the credit? Fine, she could take the credit. But she would have to take the fall that came with it. "Excuse me," I said, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate precision. "I need to use the ladies' room." Elaine nodded distractedly, already leaning in to discuss floral arrangements with Vivian. To them, my departure was nothing more than a biological necessity, a momentary pause in their grand production. I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my dress, and walked away from the table. I did not look at Evan. I could not look at him, because if I saw the worry in his eyes, I might falter. The restroom at the Harborview Crown Room was a sanctuary of marble and gold leaf, smelling faintly of lavender and old money. I locked the heavy door of the stall behind me, but I did not use the facilities. I just stood there for a moment, breathing in the silence. Then I walked to the row of sinks and gripped the cold porcelain edge, staring at my reflection in the expansive mirror. My face looked calm. It was the same face that had nodded politely while my sister stole my credit, the same face that had smiled while my mother sold me out. But behind the eyes, the calculation was running hot and fast. I had 3 options. I could see them laid out before me like an architectural blueprint. Option 1, I could go back to that table and tell the truth. I could scream that Brielle was a liar, that the reservation was mine, and that Elaine had coerced me. Result: Elaine would burst into tears. She would play the martyr, claiming I was causing a scene to ruin my sister's happiness. Brielle would look at Matthew with wide, terrified eyes. The victim of a jealous, unstable older sister, I would leave the dinner looking like a villain, and they would still find a way to twist the narrative. Option 2, I could return to the table, sit down, and agree to transfer the contract tomorrow. Result: Brielle would get her dream wedding. The Holloways would sign the check for $300,000. My mother would win, and I would lose $50,000, 2 years of my life, and every shred of self-respect I had left. I would be validating their belief that I existed solely to be consumed by them. Option 3. I could flip the board. I looked at my reflection. The realization hit me harder than the wine. Brielle didn't just want the venue. She could have asked for any venue. What she really wanted, what she was feasting on tonight, was the prestige of having secured it. She wanted the Holloway family to believe she was the kind of woman who planned 2 years in advance, the kind of woman who had vision and discipline. She was wearing my character like a stolen coat. If I transferred the contract, I wasn't just giving her a room with glass walls. I was giving her my identity. I was helping her commit fraud against her future husband. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. I didn't fix my lipstick. I didn't check my hair. I turned away from the mirror and walked out of the restroom. But I didn't turn left toward the dining room. I turned right, toward the exit. I walked past the host stand, past the maitre d' who smiled and asked if I needed my car. I nodded. I handed him the ticket. I stood under the awning in the humid night air, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. When the car pulled up, I tipped the valet $5, got in, and shut the door. The sound of the door closing severed the connection between me and the farce playing out inside the restaurant. I drove to the far end of the parking lot, under the shadow of a palm tree, and put the car in park. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was late, but I knew the conservatory's private line. I knew Eleanor often worked late on Tuesdays to handle the international clients. I dialed the number. The Luminous Conservatory, Eleanor speaking. Eleanor, I said. My voice was steady. It is Kira Walsh. Kira! Her voice brightened. I was just looking at your file. We are getting so close to the 90-day mark. I assume you are calling to confirm the tasting menu? No, Eleanor, I said. I am calling to cancel. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. I beg your pardon? Eleanor stammered. You want to cancel. I want to terminate the contract for June 14th, immediately. Kira. Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. You know the terms. We are inside the 90-day window. If you cancel now, the deposit is forfeit. That is $50,000. It is non-refundable. You will get zero back. I know, I said. $50,000, she repeated, stressing every syllable as if I didn't understand the value of money. Kira, are you sure? Can we not just postpone? If you release this date, it goes to the waiting list instantly. I have 3 brides who will take it within the hour. That is exactly what I want, I said. Release it to the waiting list. Send it to a stranger. I do not care who takes it, as long as the date is no longer under the name Walsh. But why? Eleanor asked, genuine pain in her voice. She had seen me work for this. Because, I said, looking at the glowing lights of the restaurant in the distance, where my mother was currently raising a glass to a lie. I am not paying for a party I'm not invited to. I need your verbal confirmation, Eleanor said, her voice shaking slightly. You understand that by proceeding, you are permanently relinquishing the date of June 14th and forfeiting the sum of $50,000. I understand, I said. Do it. It is done, Eleanor whispered. I am processing the release now. The date is open. Thank you, Eleanor. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the dark car. I should have felt sick. I had just incinerated a fortune. I had just thrown away the down payment on a house, a new car, a year of freedom. But I didn't feel sick. I felt light. I looked at the restaurant one last time. Inside, Elaine was probably boasting about her clever daughters. Brielle was probably holding Matthew's hand, dreaming of the photos she would post. They were so confident. They thought they had the power because they held the social capital. They thought they could squeeze me until I popped. They didn't realize that by taking everything from me, they had given me the ultimate freedom. I had nothing left to lose. I started the engine. They could try to steal the venue now. They could try to bully me into transferring it tomorrow morning. but they would find nothing but a digital ghost. The date was gone. The bridge was burned. I put the car in drive and pulled out onto the highway. I wasn't going back to the table. I wasn't going to explain myself. Let them finish their dessert. Let them enjoy the sweetness for 10 more minutes. Because when the check came, they were going to realize that the bank had closed, and I had taken the keys with me. The 24 hours following my departure from the Harborview Crown Room were defined by a silence that felt heavy and electric, like the air before a hurricane makes landfall. I went to work the next morning as if nothing had happened. I reviewed irrigation blueprints. I discussed soil pH levels with my team. I drank my coffee black, but all the while, I was waiting for the shockwave. It began at 10:30 in the morning. My phone, sitting on the corner of my drafting table, began to vibrate. It buzzed against the wood with the frantic, angry energy of a trapped insect. I glanced at the screen. Mother. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Brielle. Then Dad. Then Mother again. By noon, I had 43 missed calls and 68 text messages. The phone was hot to the touch. I did not pick it up. I did not read the messages. I simply turned the device face down and continued working on my landscape designs. I knew exactly what was happening on the other side of those calls. I did not need to be there to see it, because I had written the script myself the moment I signed that cancellation email. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the scene play out in my mind. It was vivid, cinematic, and brutally satisfying. I imagined Brielle walking into the luminous conservatory that morning. She would have been wearing white, or perhaps a soft pastel, dressing the part of the radiant bride coming to claim her prize. She would have marched up to the reception desk with that confident, slightly entitled smile she reserves for service workers, expecting them to bow to her whims. She probably had a binder with her, full of magazine clippings and color swatches, ready to start dictating her vision for a wedding she had not paid for. She would have asked for Eleanor. She would have said, with the breezy arrogance of someone who has never heard the word no, that she was there to finalize the transfer of the June 14th reservation from her sister's name to hers. And then, I imagined Eleanor's face. Eleanor is a professional. She would not have been rude. She would have been devastatingly polite. She would have typed on her keyboard, frowned slightly, and then delivered the news that would shatter Brielle's world. "I am sorry, Ms. Hart," Eleanor would say, "but that reservation no longer exists." I could see Brielle's smile faltering. "What do you mean?" "My sister, Kira Walsh, held the date. We are just changing the name." "Ms. Walsh contacted us last night," Eleanor would explain, her voice cool and final. "She exercised her right to terminate the agreement. The contract has been voided. The date was released back into our system at 8 o'clock this morning." That was the moment the ground would have opened up beneath my sister's feet. "Released?" Brielle would screech, her voice climbing that octave that only dogs can hear. "Well, unrelease it. Put it back. I am taking it." "I am afraid I cannot do that," Eleanor would reply. "Per our policy, once a prime date is released, it goes to the priority wait list. We sent out the automated notification at 8:05. The date was secured by another client at 8:12. June 14th is fully booked." I imagined Brielle trying to argue. I imagined her pulling the "do you know who I am" card. I imagined her trying to claim ownership of a contract that never bore her signature. But contracts are cold, unfeeling things. They do not care about tears. They do not care about family drama. They care about signatures and deposits. And since my name was the only one on the paper, and my signature was the one on the cancellation, Brielle was nothing more than a stranger shouting in a lobby. She had no legal standing. She had no leverage. She was just a girl in a pastel dress standing in a glass house, realizing that the walls were closing in. My phone buzzed again, snapping me back to reality. I finally picked it up. The preview on the screen showed a text from Elaine. "What did you do?" Another one followed immediately. "You selfish, spiteful little brat. You destroyed everything. Fix this. Call them back and fix this right now." I unlocked the phone and opened the family group chat. It was a stream of vitriol. Brielle had sent a string of crying emojis followed by accusations that I was jealous, that I was mentally unstable, that I was trying to ruin her life because I was a bitter spinster. My father had sent a rare, curt message demanding I stop playing games and act like an adult. For 31 years, my reaction to these messages would have been panic. I would have called them back, apologizing, crying, trying to explain, trying to find a solution. I would have called the conservatory and begged. I would have offered to pay double. I would have done anything to stop the yelling. But today, looking at the words on the screen, I felt nothing. The cord had been cut. I typed a single message into the group chat. I do not want the venue anymore. I canceled it last night. Good luck finding another one. I hit send. Then, before the 3 bubbles indicating they were typing could turn into more abuse, I went into the settings. Block contact. Mom. Block contact. Dad. Block contact. Brielle. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the first time in my life I had not tried to explain myself. I did not defend my actions. I did not offer a compromise. I simply removed myself from the equation. However, while I had successfully cut off the noise from my family, I knew the real explosion was happening elsewhere, and it was happening in a place where blocking a number would not solve the problem. It was happening in the pristine, terrifyingly organized office of Vivian Holloway. The true catastrophe for Brielle was not losing the venue. Venues can be replaced. You can get married in a hotel, a garden, or a church. The catastrophe was the lie she had told at dinner. Brielle and Elaine had sat at that table in the Crown Room and looked Vivian Holloway in the eye. They had told her, with absolute conviction, that Brielle had booked the venue 2 years ago. They had sold a narrative of Brielle as a prudent, forward-thinking planner who had used her own savings to secure a prestigious asset. Vivian had been impressed. She had agreed to the wedding budget based on that specific character reference. Now, 24 hours later, Vivian would naturally want to start the ball rolling. I learned later, through the whispers of the Harborview social grapevine, exactly how that conversation went down. Around 2 p.m, while Brielle was likely still screaming at my mother in their living room, Vivian Holloway sent a polite, professional email to her future daughter-in-law. Subject: Venue confirmation. Deposit reimbursement. Dear Brielle, I trust you are resting after our lovely dinner. My assistant needs to process the initial vendor payments for the June 14th date. Please forward the original booking confirmation from the conservatory, along with the receipt for the $50,000 deposit you mentioned. Since you paid for it personally 2 years ago, we would like to reimburse you from the wedding fund immediately. It was a trap. Though Vivian probably did not intend it as one, she was just doing business. She needed the paper trail. But Brielle had no paper trail. She could not send the confirmation because the confirmation had my name on it, and even if she had tried to Photoshop it, which I wouldn't put past her, she couldn't send the receipt. The receipt showed a transfer from Kira Walsh. Furthermore, she couldn't even claim that she gave the money to me to book it, because she had explicitly bragged at dinner about doing it herself, with her own savings, as a surprise. I could picture the panic in the Hart household. They were trapped in a web of their own spinning. If they told Vivian the venue was canceled, Vivian would ask why. If they said, Kira canceled it, Vivian would ask, why did Kira have the power to cancel Brielle's reservation? And then the question would arise, why was the reservation in Kira's name if Brielle booked it 2 years ago? And then, why did you lie to me? Brielle tried to stall. She sent a reply saying she was having trouble locating the file in her email archives. She said she would bring a hard copy to their next meeting. She made up an excuse about the conservatory's server being down. But Vivian Holloway did not become the matriarch of a shipping empire by accepting the server is down as an excuse. Vivian did what any smart investor does when a deal starts to smell rotten. She went to the source. Late that afternoon, Vivian picked up her phone. She did not call Brielle. She did not call Elaine. She called the Luminous Conservatory directly. Good afternoon, Vivian would have said. her voice smooth as silk. "This is Vivian Holloway. I am calling regarding the wedding booking for June 14th. I believe it is under the name Hart, or perhaps Walsh. I am the mother of the groom, and I just wanted to verify the status of the deposit so I can cut a check." The employee on the other end would have looked at the screen. They would have seen the cancellation time-stamped from the previous night. They would have seen the name on the account. "I am sorry, Mrs. Holloway," the employee would have said, "but we do not have a booking for a wedding on June 14th. That date was released this morning after the contract holder, Ms. Walsh, terminated the agreement." "Terminated?" Vivian would have asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. "And when was the original booking made?" "Let me see. The file was opened 2 years ago by Ms. Kira Walsh. There is no mention of a Brielle Hart on the account history." Vivian would not have screamed. She would not have slammed the phone down. She would have simply thanked the employee, hung up, and sat in her office for a long time, staring at the wall. She had the answer. The girl who claimed to have bet on her future had actually bet on nothing. The mother who claimed to value standards had presented a counterfeit bill of goods. They had lied about the venue. They had lied about the money. They had lied about the competence. Vivian Holloway did not get angry. Anger is a waste of energy. Instead, she got quiet. She opened a new file on her desk. She began to make a list. She started to make calls to other vendors. To the caterers Brielle claimed to have shortlisted, to the florists. She started a forensic audit of my sister's life. I sat in my office, watching the sun go down, knowing that the silence from the Holloway camp was far more dangerous than the noise from my family. My mother and sister were screaming into the void, thinking they were fighting a family squabble. They didn't realize they were already under investigation for fraud. I took a sip of water. It tasted clean. I had burned the bridge, yes, but the fire was illuminating things that had been hidden in the dark for a very long time, and the show was just getting started. The unraveling of a lie is rarely a singular, explosive event. It is usually a series of small, quiet failures that accumulate until the structural integrity of the deceit simply collapses. I was not in the room when Vivian Holloway began her dissection of my family, but I know the players, and I know the game. Later, Evan told me the details he had gleaned from a shell-shocked Matthew, and the picture that emerged was one of clinical, brutal efficiency. It started with a phone call that I had anticipated. After receiving the confusing email from Brielle regarding the missing files, Vivian Holloway did not wait. She picked up the phone and called the administration office of the Luminous Conservatory directly. She did not speak to a junior associate. She asked for the director of sales. Vivian asked a simple question. She wanted to verify the tenure of the client relationship with Ms. Brielle Hart. She wanted to know how long Brielle had held the reservation, just to ensure that the 2-year claim was accurate for her records. The answer she received was the first domino. "I am sorry, Mrs. Holloway," the director told her, "but we have no record of a Brielle Hart ever being a client here. The reservation for June 14th was held by a Ms. Kira Walsh. It was opened 2 years ago and terminated yesterday evening. Ms. Hart has never signed a document, paid a deposit, or attended a planning meeting at this facility." Vivian did not shout. She did not demand to speak to a manager. She simply thanked the director, hung up the phone, and looked at the checkbook sitting on her mahogany desk. She had been about to write a check for the initial vendor costs. Now, she closed the checkbook and placed it inside her drawer. She summoned my mother and sister to the Holloway estate that very afternoon. Elaine and Brielle arrived thinking they were there to discuss flower arrangements and menu tastings. They walked into the library, a room lined with books that had actually been read, and found Vivian sitting behind her desk like a judge on the bench. Matthew was there too, sitting in a leather wingback chair, looking confused and slightly anxious. Vivian did not offer them tea. She did not offer them small talk. She simply folded her hands and looked at Brielle. "Brielle," Vivian said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I have a few questions regarding the logistics of the contract you mentioned last night, the one you said you secured 2 years ago with your own savings." Brielle smiled, but it was a brittle thing. "Of course, Mrs. Holloway," Like I said, the files are a bit of a mess right now because Kira— I am not interested in Kira right now, Vivian interrupted. I am interested in you. Since you were the one who had the foresight to book the venue, you must be familiar with the terms of the agreement. Can you tell me what the liability coverage requirement is for the conservatory? The room went silent. The liability coverage? Brielle blinked. She looked at Elaine. It is a standard clause in any venue contract, Vivian said, her eyes not leaving Brielle's face. $1 million? $2 million? What does the contract state? I think it is standard, Brielle stammered. Whatever is normal. And the cancellation policy? Vivian pressed. What is the penalty for cancellation within the 90-day window? You signed the contract, so you must have read the fine print. Brielle shifted in her seat. Her face was turning a splotchy red. Well, it was 2 years ago. I don't remember every little detail. Okay, Vivian said. She did not look convinced. Let us try something simpler. Who is your point of contact at the conservatory? You must have spoken to them dozens of times over the last 24 months to coordinate the hold. It was a woman, Brielle said. I think her name was Sarah? Or maybe Jennifer. Her name is Eleanor, Vivian said. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. And she has never heard of you. Matthew sat up straighter in his chair. He looked from his mother to his fiancée. For the first time, the blind adoration in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of doubt. He was watching Brielle struggle to answer basic questions about a project she claimed to have masterminded, and the discrepancy was becoming impossible to ignore. Mom, what is going on? Matthew asked. That is what I am trying to ascertain, Vivian said. She turned her gaze to Elaine. You sat at my dinner table last night, Elaine, and you told me that your daughter was a prudent, capable planner. You told me she used her own money. You told me she secured the most difficult venue in Florida through sheer competence. She did, Elaine insisted, her voice rising in that defensive tone she uses when she is cornered. Brielle is very capable. It is just that Kira has been handling the administrative side. Kira is the one who wanted to put her name on the paperwork. She insisted on it. You know how older sisters can be. She wanted to feel involved. So Kira held the contract, Vivian stated. On paper, yes, Elaine said, waving her hand as if legal documents were mere suggestions. But it was Brielle's vision. It was Brielle's wedding. Kira was just helping. Then why did you tell me Brielle booked it? Vivian asked. Why did Brielle sit there and tell me she used her own savings? It is a figure of speech, Elaine snapped. The family money is all the same. Does it really matter whose name is on the dotted line? The point is that we had the venue, and now, because Kira is having some sort of mental breakdown, she has canceled it out of spite. Elaine was playing her ace card. The Kira is crazy defense. It had worked for her entire life. Whenever I achieved something, she minimized it. Whenever I reacted to her abuse, she labeled me emotional. She thought she could paint me as the villain and Brielle as the victim, and that Vivian would naturally side with the weeping bride. But Vivian Holloway operates on logic, not sentiment. Let me understand this, Vivian said, leaning forward. You are claiming that Kira is unstable. You are claiming she is jealous and vindictive. Yes, Brielle cried out, finding her voice. She has always been jealous of me. She can't stand that I'm getting married to Matthew. That is why she canceled it. She wants to ruin my day. If she is so unstable, Vivian said, her voice sharp as a scalpel, why did you allow her to hold the legal rights to the most important element of the wedding? If Brielle is the capable one, the star, as you call her, why was she not the one holding the contract? Why was the fate of a $300,000 event left in the hands of someone you claim is mentally unwell? Elaine opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had walked into a logical trap. Either I was competent and they had lied about Brielle's involvement, or I was incompetent and they were negligent for letting me run the show. There was no third option where they looked good. It is complicated, Elaine muttered. It does not seem complicated to me, Vivian said. It seems like a fabrication. Vivian picked up a folder from her desk. I did not stop at the conservatory, she continued. After I spoke to Eleanor, I decided to look into the other vendors Brielle claims to have shortlisted: the caterer, the orchestra, the florist. She opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the desk toward Matthew. I called the catering company Brielle mentioned. They have no inquiry from a Brielle Hart. I called the orchestra. They are fully booked for June 14th and have been for 6 months. No one has reached out to them. Matthew picked up the paper. His hands were shaking slightly. Brielle, Matthew said, looking at her. You told me you had the tasting set up. You told me the menu was done. I was going to, Brielle sobbed. I have it all in my head. I just haven't made the calls yet because I was waiting for the budget. You lied, Matthew said. It wasn't a question. I didn't lie, Brielle shrieked. I delegated. Kira was supposed to do it. It is Kira's fault. She was supposed to be helping me, and she abandoned me. So Kira does everything, Vivian said. And you take the credit. Is that the arrangement? No, Elaine shouted. You are twisting everything. We are a family. We help each other. Kira is supposed to support her sister. The fact that she canceled the venue is an act of malice. You should be angry at her. Vivian, not attacking Brielle. Vivian stood up. She was not a tall woman, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. I am not angry at Kira, Vivian said calmly. Kira appears to be the only person in this entire narrative who actually knows how to execute a contract. She booked the venue. She paid the deposit. And when she decided she no longer wanted to be part of this charade, she exercised her legal right to cancel it. That is what a capable person does. They take action. She walked around the desk and stood in front of Brielle. You, on the other hand, have presented me with nothing but tears and excuses. You claim to be a manager. You claim to be a planner. But from what I can see, you are a passenger in your own life. How dare you, Elaine hissed. We are the Harts. We are a respected family in this town. Respect is earned, Vivian countered. It is not inherited, and it certainly is not gained by parading borrowed achievements. Vivian turned to Matthew. Matthew, she said, this is your decision. You are a grown man. If you want to marry this woman, I will not stop you. But I need you to understand what you are marrying. You are not marrying a partner. You are marrying a dependent. And you are marrying into a family that believes the truth is a flexible concept. Matthew looked at Brielle. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing candy, not a woman ready to run a household. Brielle, Matthew said softly, did you book anything? Anything at all? Did you do anything for this wedding yourself? Brielle looked at him, her eyes pleading. I picked the colors, she whispered. I picked the color palette. It was going to be dusty rose and gold. The silence that followed was excruciating. Vivian walked back to her desk and picked up the checkbook. She didn't open it. She held it in her hand, weighing it. I think we are done here, Vivian said. What about the budget? Elaine demanded, panic finally breaking through her arrogance. The wedding is in 3 months. We need the deposit for the new venue. If we lose the conservatory, we have to book the hotel ballroom immediately. Vivian looked at Elaine with a look of pure, unadulterated disdain. I am not writing this check, Elaine. You promised, Elaine screamed. You promised $300,000. I promised $300,000 for a wedding that met my standards, Vivian said. I promised it to a bride who I believed was capable, honest, and high quality. She dropped the checkbook back into the drawer and locked it with a sharp, metallic click. I do not finance fraud, Vivian said, and I certainly do not spend $300,000 on a family that uses words instead of paper. She pressed the intercom button on her desk. Show the Harts out, she said to her assistant. Elaine stood there, her mouth open, her face a mask of shock. Brielle was sobbing into her hands. Matthew just sat there, staring at the floor, looking like a man who had just woken up from a very long, very expensive dream. They were escorted out of the library, past the rows of books, and out the heavy front doors. They left with nothing, no venue, no check, no dignity. And the worst part for them was that I wasn't even there to blame. I was miles away, sitting in my quiet office, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, knowing that the truth had finally done the one thing I never could. It had silenced them. The siege on my apartment began at 6 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday. I had just returned from work, my boots still caked with the mud of a job site. When I saw the familiar silver sedan parked illegally in the fire lane in front of my building, they knew I could block their numbers, but they also knew I could not block my front door. I considered turning around. I considered driving to Evan's place and letting them pound on the wood until the neighbors called the police. But I realized that running would only prolong the inevitable. This infection needed to be drained. I needed to look them in the eye one last time, not as the daughter they bullied, but as the woman who had just cost them a fortune. I walked up the stairs. They were waiting in the hallway. Elaine was not screaming. That would have been too easy to dismiss. Instead, she was performing the role of the grieving matriarch. Her eyes were swollen, her posture hunched as if carrying a physical weight. Beside her stood my father, hands in his pockets, staring at the scuff marks on the floor. And leaning against the wall was Brielle, her arms crossed, her face twisted into a mask of pure distilled hatred. "You let us in," Elaine said. Her voice was a raspy whisper. "We need to talk, as a family." I unlocked the door and stepped aside. "You have 10 minutes. They filed into my small, tidy living room. It was a space I had paid for with my own money, decorated with my own taste, free of the gilded clutter that filled my parents' house. They looked out of place here, like peacocks in a workshop. Elaine sat on the sofa and immediately buried her face in her hands. "How could you?" she sobbed. "How could you do this to your own flesh and blood? We are ruined. Kira, ruined. Vivian Holloway threw us out of her house like common criminals. She called us frauds." "She called you frauds because you tried to defraud her," I said, leaning against the kitchen island, keeping a safe distance. "I just refused to be the accomplices." "You are heartless," Elaine wailed, looking up with tear-streaked cheeks. "We did this for the family, for you too. If Brielle married well, we all would have benefited. We would have had security, connections. But you let your petty jealousy destroy it all. You would rather burn $50,000 of your own money than see your sister happy." I looked at my father. He had not said a word. He was standing by the window, looking out at the parking lot. "Dad," I said, "do you have anything to say?" He turned slowly. His face was gray. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from hard work. It was the exhaustion of a man who has spent 30 years surrendering his spine piece by piece. "You should have just transferred it, Kira," he said softly. "It would have been easier. Why do you always have to make things so hard?" That sentence cut deeper than any of Elaine's histrionics. Why do you always have to make things so hard? "Hard?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I worked double shifts for 2 years. I saved every penny. I built something for myself, and you stood there and watched them try to take it. You watched them lie about me. You watched them sell me out to the Holloways. And your only opinion is that my resistance was inconvenient for you?" He looked away. He couldn't hold my gaze. In that moment, the final illusion of my childhood dissolved. I used to think my father was a victim of my mother's domineering personality. I used to think he was a silent ally, but silence is not an alliance. Silence, when witnessing injustice, is endorsement. He wasn't a victim. He was a collaborator. The betrayal wasn't just impulsive. It was systemic. It was the operating system of this family. "He is right," Brielle spat, stepping forward. "You are selfish. You think you are so high and mighty with your little job and your little savings account. But you know what? I am going to make you pay for this." "How?" I asked. "You have no money, you have no venue, you have no credibility." "I have a voice," Brielle sneered. "I am going to tell everyone. I am going to tell Aunt Martha, Uncle Jerry, all the cousins. I am going to tell them that you had a mental breakdown. I will tell them you attacked me. I will tell them you are so jealous of my engagement that you sabotage the wedding out of spite. I will make sure that by the time I am done, no one in this town will want to hire you or speak to you. It was a credible threat. In Harborview, reputation is everything. A rumor planted by a tearful, beautiful girl could spread like kudzu, choking my business and my social life. Elaine nodded, wiping her eyes, shifting instantly from grief to strategy. She is right. Kira, people will believe us. We are the parents. We are the grieving family. You are the cold, distant spinster who lives alone. If you don't fix this, if you don't go to Vivian right now and tell her it was a mistake, that you were confused, that you are transferring the rights back, we will destroy your name. I looked at them, the three of them, the trinity of narcissism. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of a demolition expert who has just checked the wiring on the explosives one last time and found it perfect. You still don't get it, I said quietly. Get what? Brielle snapped. I didn't cancel the venue because I wanted the room, I said. And you didn't try to steal it because you loved the architecture. You didn't need the location. Brielle, you needed the story. You needed the lie. You needed to walk into the Holloway family wearing a costume of competence that you stole from my closet. I needed the venue to have a perfect wedding, Brielle screamed. No, I corrected. You needed the venue to hide the fact that you have nothing else to offer. You are empty, Brielle, and you wanted to fill that emptiness with my work. You are cruel, Elaine hissed, standing up. You are a cold, unnatural woman. You don't understand what it takes to survive in this world. A woman has to maintain an image. We have to polish the truth to make it acceptable. You are so rigid. You treat life like one of your blueprints, black and white. You don't understand nuance. I understand nuance, I said. I just don't accept being used as a prop in your stage play. Then prepare yourself, Elaine said, her voice hard as granite. Because we are going to war. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know what you did. We will paint you as a monster. Go ahead, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen a few times and held it up. But before you start making calls, I said, you should probably know what I have in my hand. We don't care about your phone, Brielle scoffed. You might care about this, I said. I opened a folder I had named Insurance. Do you remember the text messages you sent me on Tuesday afternoon, Mom? I asked. Elaine froze. I kept them, I said. I have the screenshots. Specifically, the one where you said, and I quote, I already promised Vivian you would give it to her. Don't make me a liar. Hand it over or else. Elaine's face went pale. And, I continued, scrolling, I have the message from Brielle. Just transfer it. Mom and Dad will pay you back eventually. Stop being greedy. And the one where you admitted, we have to fool the Holloways into thinking I booked it so they release the budget. The room went dead silent. The air conditioner hummed, sounding like a jet engine in the quiet. You wouldn't, Elaine whispered. If you say one word about me to the family, I said, my voice steady and cold. If you tell one lie to a cousin, or a neighbor, or a client, I will not just defend myself. I will forward this entire conversation history directly to Vivian Holloway. Elaine grabbed the back of the sofa for support. Think about it, I said, stepping closer. Right now, Vivian thinks you are incompetent and liars. But if she sees these texts, she will see that you didn't just lie. She will see that you conspired. She will see that you planned a premeditated fraud to extract $300,000 from her family. That isn't just a canceled wedding. Elaine, that is attempted grand larceny. That is the kind of thing that doesn't just get you uninvited from dinner parties. It gets you sued. It gets you investigated. Brielle looked at Elaine, panic rising in her chest. Mom, is that true? Elaine didn't answer. She was staring at me as if she had never seen me before. She was looking for the weak, compliant daughter she had raised, the one who always folded, the one who always apologized. She couldn't find her. You are bluffing, Elaine tried, but her voice lacked conviction. Try me, I said. Go home. Pick up the phone. Call Aunt Martha. See what happens 5 minutes later. I walked to the door and opened it wide. The hallway light spilled in, harsh and unforgiving. Get out, I said. My father was the first to move. He walked past me without looking up. A defeated man. Brielle followed, her face streaked with mascara, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Elaine was the last. She stopped in the doorway and looked at me. There was no love in her eyes, only a simmering, impotent rage. You think you have won, she spat. But you have lost your family. You are alone, Kira. You have built a wall around yourself, and now you have no one. I would rather be alone in a house built on truth, I said, than surrounded by people in a house built on lies. You are a destroyer, she whispered. That is all you are. I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. You are forgetting what I do for a living. Mother, I said, I am a structural specialist. I lay foundations. I know exactly how much weight a beam can hold before it snaps, and I know exactly where to hit a structure to bring the whole thing down when it was built wrong. I slammed the door in her face. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and listened. I heard their footsteps retreating down the hall, slow and heavy. But as the silence of my apartment wrapped around me, I realized something. They were gone, and for the first time in 31 years, they were afraid of me. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was still shaking, but the water was clear. I drank it down. The war was over. I had fired the final shot. Now, all that was left was to survey the wreckage and see if anything could grow from the ashes. The official decree from the Holloway Empire arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet ping of an email notification, because my name had been attached to the original venue contract, and because Vivian Holloway is a woman who believes in closing every loop with administrative precision. I was copied on the final correspondence sent to my mother and sister. The subject line was stark: notice of budget withdrawal and wedding sponsorship termination. I sat in my kitchen, a mug of tea warming my hands, and read the autopsy of my sister's dream. Vivian did not mince words. In the body of the email, she stated that due to demonstrable lack of integrity and misrepresentation of financial assets and planning capabilities, the Holloway family was officially rescinding the $300,000 wedding budget. She noted that while she would not impede the marriage itself, she refused to finance a production built on deceit. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Without the Holloway fortune backing them, the wedding of the century dissolved overnight. The imported peonies were replaced by carnations. The string quartet was canceled. The 5-course plated dinner was downgraded to a buffet at a mid-range hotel near the airport, a venue that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and stale cigarettes. But the loss of luxury was not the real punishment. The real punishment was the silence of the phone. As the budget evaporated, so did the vendors, the photographer, the videographer, the high-end makeup artist. They all walked away the moment the credit card authorization failed. Brielle was left standing in the wreckage of her own entitlement, holding nothing but a Pinterest board and a mounting pile of cancellation fees. Through Evan, who had maintained a tenuous friendship with Matthew, I learned what happened inside the relationship. Matthew did not break off the engagement. That would have been too clean. Instead, he did something far more painful. He started to negotiate. For the first time since they met, Matthew looked at Brielle not as the perfect girl or the star, but as a liability. He saw the panic in her eyes when the money vanished. He saw the way she scrambled to lie, to blame, to deflect. The illusion of the capable, wealthy, organized partner was gone, replaced by the reality of a desperate girl who had tried to con his mother. Matthew told her that if they were to proceed, the wedding would be postponed indefinitely until they could pay for it themselves. Furthermore, he presented her with a prenuptial agreement. It was not the standard boilerplate document. It was a strict, ironclad contract that separated their assets completely and protected the Holloway Trust from any debts Brielle or Elaine might incur. Brielle, who had planned to float through life on the Holloway raft, was suddenly being asked to swim. Evan told me she spent 3 days crying. But this time, Matthew did not comfort her. He just watched, taking notes, calculating the risk. Elaine tried one last desperate maneuver to save face. She attempted to spin the narrative within their shrinking social circle, telling anyone who would listen that the downgrade was my fault. She claimed that my mental instability regarding the venue had forced them to change plans to protect the family peace. But Vivian Holloway had anticipated this. When Elaine tried to tell this lie at a charity luncheon, imply that I had sabotaged the event, Vivian simply intervened. She did not make a scene. She merely stated, loud enough for the table to hear, that the budget was withdrawn because the Hart family had failed a due diligence check regarding the venue contract. She mentioned the word fraud only once, but once was enough. The rumors died instantly, strangled by the truth. And then came the twist that I had not even seen coming. In the final paragraph of that termination email, Vivian revealed a detail that turned my blood cold. She wrote that during their private meeting in the library, she had given Brielle one final opportunity to come clean. Before she called the conservatory, Vivian had asked Brielle, "Is there anything else about the booking process I should know? Anything at all?" It was an exit ramp. It was a chance for Brielle to say, "Yes, actually, Kira helped me, and there is a mix-up with the names." If Brielle had told the truth then, Vivian might have forgiven the clumsiness. She might have respected the honesty. But Brielle had looked her in the eye and said, "No, everything is perfect." She chose the lie. She chose it even when the truth was the only thing that could save her. That was what broke Matthew's trust. It wasn't the money. It was the realization that his future wife would rather double down on a falsehood than admit a mistake. 3 days after the email, I received a final letter from my parents. It was not an apology. It was a handwritten note from Elaine, dropped in my mailbox because I had blocked her digital access. "You have destroyed this family," she wrote. "I hope your $50,000 keeps you warm at night, because you have no mother, no father, and no sister left. You broke us." I stood by my trash can, holding the note. "I didn't break you," I said to the empty room. "I just stopped holding you together." I tore the note in half, then in quarters, then I let the pieces fall into the bin. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. The balance was significantly lower than it had been a week ago. $50,000 was gone. That money represented 2 years of overtime, skipped vacations, and packed lunches. It was a staggering loss. But as I looked at the number, I felt a strange, soaring lightness in my chest. I had paid $50,000, and in exchange, I had purchased my freedom. I had bought my way out of the obligation to be the fixer. I had bought my way out of the guilt trips. I had bought my way out of a lifetime of being the supporting character in Brielle's tragedy. I opened my email client. I found the contact for Eleanor at the Luminous Conservatory. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers hovering over the keys. I wasn't doing this to reclaim the past. The June 14th date was gone, taken by some other lucky bride who presumably hadn't had to burn her family to the ground to get it. I didn't want that date anymore. It was tainted. But I was a landscape designer. I was a woman who built things. And I knew that the only way to truly move on was to start building something new, something that was entirely undeniably mine. I began to type. "Dear Eleanor, I hope this email finds you well. I am writing to inquire about the availability of the conservatory for the fall season of next year. Specifically, I am looking at dates in October. I am aware that the deposit requirement remains the same. I will be starting my savings fund from scratch effectively today. However, I would like to place a preliminary inquiry on the calendar. This event will not be under the name Hart. It will be solely under the name Walsh, and I can guarantee that this time there will be no cancellations. Best regards, Kira." I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen until the message vanished into the ether. I didn't have the money yet. I didn't have the ring yet, though Evan and I had talked about it. And I knew it was coming, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time in my life, I was planning a future that no one could take away from me. I lost the venue, I lost the money, I lost the family that saw me as a resource rather than a person. But as I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the Florida sunset bleeding gold across the sky, I realized I had won the only thing that actually counted. I had won my name back. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me where you are listening from and if you think Kira did the right thing by canceling the contract. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people.